web of lies unravels, Leslie Thomas's ultimate betrayal. The truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it's buried. For Eva Thomas, that truth arrived in the most devastating form imaginable, a medical file tucked away in a forgotten drawer, yellowed with age but containing revelations that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her life. Leslie Thomas had always been a woman of many faces. The residents of Fairmont Crest knew her as Dana, Sherry, Anna, a shapeshifter whose wigs and personas allowed her to slip through the community like smoke. She had poisoned Laura Peterson to keep her machinations hidden, manipulated DNA test results to prove Ted Richardson was Eva's father, and orchestrated an elaborate revenge scheme that spanned decades. But the discovery Eva made on that fateful afternoon revealed a deception so profound, so monstrous, that even Leslie's previous crimes paled in comparison. The medical records Eva stumbled upon weren't recent. They dated back more than 20 years, before Eva was born, before Leslie had even arrived in Fairmont Crest with her daughter in tow. The diagnosis was clinical, matter-of-fact, complete infertility due to severe endometriosis and scarring. Multiple consultations. Repeated confirmations. Leslie Thomas could never have biological children. Eva's hands trembled as she held the papers. The implications crashed over her like a tidal wave. If Leslie couldn't have children, then who was Eva? Where had she come from? And more terrifyingly, what had Leslie done to obtain her? The confrontation. When Eva finally confronted her mother, Leslie was in her apartment, sorting through another collection of wigs, tools of her trade, implements of deception. The setting felt grimly appropriate. A woman who wore so many false faces, standing among her disguises, about to have her greatest lie exposed. "Who am I?" Eva's voice cut through the silence like a blade. She held up the medical records, her entire body shaking with a volatile mixture of rage, betrayal, and desperate hope that there might be some explanation, some justification that would make sense of this nightmare. Leslie turned slowly, and for just a moment, something flickered across her face, surprise, perhaps, or calculation. Then her expression hardened into something cold and impenetrable. "So you found those?" Leslie said, her voice devoid of emotion. No panic. No remorse. Just a flat acknowledgement of fact. "Answer me!" Eva's voice broke. "If you can't have children, then who am I? What did you do?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of lies. Then Leslie smiled, that same calculating smile she'd worn when she ran Laura off the road, when she'd poisoned her in the hospital, when she'd manipulated DNA results to ensnare Ted Richardson in her web of revenge. The truth emerges. "You want the truth?" Leslie's voice was almost conversational, as if she were discussing the weather rather than revealing the architecture of Eva's entire existence. "Fine. Let me tell you about a young woman named Sarah, naive, pregnant, and desperately in love with Ted Richardson." Eva felt the floor shift beneath her feet. Leslie continued, her words precise and deliberate. "This was years ago, before Ted married Nicole, before he became the respectable Dr. Richardson everyone admires. Sarah was a waitress at the cafe where I worked. Sweet girl. Stupid but sweet. She thought Ted loved her. She thought he'd leave his perfect life for her when she told him she was pregnant. "No," Eva whispered, but Leslie pressed on, relentless. "Ted did what he always does. He threw money at the problem and ran. Gave Sarah $50,000 to disappear, just like he tried to do with me later. But Sarah made a mistake. She told me about it. Showed me the check. Cried on my shoulder about the man who'd broken her heart." Leslie's eyes gleamed with a predatory light. "I saw an opportunity. Ted Richardson had ruined my life, dismissed me like I was nothing. But Sarah had something I could use. Something that could give me leverage, power, the ultimate tool for revenge." Eva's legs gave out. She sank onto the couch, her entire body numb. I befriended Sarah. Took care of her during her pregnancy. Made myself indispensable. And when you were born, when she was at her most vulnerable, her most exhausted. Leslie's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I made sure she wouldn't be a problem anymore. The words hung in the air like poison gas. You killed her? Eva's voice was hollow. I did what was necessary, Leslie replied with chilling calm. Sarah served her purpose, she gave me you. And you, my dear Eva, you've been the perfect weapon all along. The weapon. Eva looked up at her mother. No, not her mother, this stranger wearing a familiar face, with horror dawning in her eyes. Everything I've done, every move I've made over the years, has been building to this. Leslie continued, her voice almost reverent now, as if she were describing a masterpiece. I raised you. I molded you. I fed you stories about the father who abandoned you, who threw us away like garbage. I watched your resentment grow, shaped it, directed it. You've been my instrument of revenge against Ted Richardson from the moment I took you from Sarah's arms. Eva felt bow rise in her throat. The DNA test. You said Ted was my father? He is, Leslie confirmed. That part is true. Sarah's bastard child. But I made sure the results came back exactly as I needed them to. I've been planning this for over 20 years, Eva. Every detail, every contingency. Leslie moved closer, her expression intense. Do you understand what you've accomplished? You've torn apart Ted's marriage. You've driven a wedge through the Richardson family. You've made him suffer in ways that money can never fix. You've been absolutely perfect. I'm not a weapon, Eva said, her voice strengthening even as tears streamed down her face. I'm a person. Sarah was a person. You're a monster. For the first time, genuine emotion crossed Leslie's face, but it wasn't remorse. It was cold, calculated fury. You're what I made you, Leslie hissed. You think Ted wants you? You think the Richardsons will embrace you once they know the full truth? You're not his daughter because he chose you. You're his punishment. His shame. His permanent reminder of the lives he destroyed. The cold confession. Eva stood on shaking legs, backing away from the woman who'd raised her, the woman who'd murdered her real mother, the woman who'd used her as a pawn in a decades-long revenge scheme. Why? It was the only question that mattered now. Why tell me this? Why now? Leslie's smile returned, sharp as broken glass. Because you were starting to care about them. I could see it. You were getting soft, starting to think of them as family, starting to question our plan. I needed you to understand the truth. You're not Ted's daughter. You're my weapon. The perfect tool to destroy everything he holds dear. The words echoed in the apartment, final and irrevocable. You don't feel anything for me, do you? Eva asked, her voice barely audible. You never did. Leslie tilted her head, considering the question with the same detachment she might give to choosing which wig to wear. You served your purpose. You still are serving it, really. Ted's life is in ruins, his marriage destroyed, his family fractured. That's all that matters. What about Sarah? Eva demanded, anger finally breaking through her shock. What about my real mother? Didn't she matter? Sarah was weak, Leslie said dismissively. She let Ted Richardson walk all over her, just like every other woman in his life. But I'm not weak. I've spent 20 years plotting, planning, positioning every piece on the board. And now, finally, Ted Richardson is paying for what he did. Eva felt something break inside her, not her spirit, but the chains that had bound her to this woman's madness for so long. You're right about one thing. I'm not your daughter. And I won't be your weapon anymore. You don't have a choice, Leslie said, her voice hardening. If you go to the police, to Ted, to anyone, I'll make sure they know you were complicit. You ran Laura off the road, didn't you? Or did you? It doesn't matter. I'll make them believe it. I'll destroy you before I let you ruin everything I've built. The thread hung between them, but Eva's resolve had crystallized into something unbreakable. I don't know who I really am, Eva said quietly. I don't know if Ted is actually my father, or if that's another one of your lies. I don't know who Sarah really was, or what kind of person I might have become if she'd lived to raise me. But I know one thing with absolute certainty: I am not you. The aftermath. As Eva walked out of that apartment, leaving Leslie standing among her wigs and her schemes, she carried with her a truth more devastating than any lie. She had been born not from love but from revenge, raised not as a daughter but as a weapon, and used not for her own sake but to satisfy one woman's bottomless need for retribution. The question swirled in her mind like a storm. Was Ted Richardson really her father, or had Leslie manipulated that too? Where was Sarah buried? Did Sarah have other family, people who'd wondered what happened to her? And most painfully, who was Eva Thomas really, beneath all the lies and manipulation? Behind her, in the apartment, Leslie stood motionless. Her expression revealed nothing, no regret, no second thoughts, no human warmth. She had told Eva the truth with the same cold calculation she applied to everything else in her life. Because for Leslie Thomas, people weren't people. They were tools, weapons, means to an end. And Eva had been the sharpest weapon in her arsenal. But weapons, once they understand what they are, can choose not to be used. And in that apartment, amid the ruins of a 20-year-long deception, Eva Thomas had finally made a choice that was entirely her own. The truth about Leslie's crimes, the murder of Sarah, the manipulation of DNA evidence, the poisoning of Laura Peterson, the decades of lies, would eventually come to light. But for now, Eva walked away from her past and toward an uncertain future, knowing only that she would have to rebuild her identity from the ground up, free from the poisonous influence of the woman who'd claimed to be her mother. In Fairmont Crest, the web of lies was beginning to unravel. And at its center sat Leslie Thomas, surrounded by her disguises, her schemes, and the hollow victory of a revenge that had consumed everything, including whatever humanity she might once have possessed. The question that remained was simple but profound. When the truth finally emerged, when all of Leslie's deceptions were exposed to the light, would there be anything left of Eva Thomas to salvage? Or had Leslie's ultimate weapon been broken beyond repair by the very woman who'd forged her? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: the games were over, the masks were slipping, and the reckoning Leslie Thomas had so carefully orchestrated for Ted Richardson was about to become her own. Next, the pristine gates of Fairmont Crest have witnessed countless scandals, but nothing quite compares to the explosive drama unfolding between Naomi and Jacob Hawthorne. What began as a marriage built on mutual understanding has crumbled into a battlefield of conflicting desires, hidden truths, and dangerous secrets that threaten to destroy not just their relationship, but multiple lives in the process. The crisis erupted when Naomi discovered she was pregnant, a revelation that should have brought joy but instead exposed the fundamental fracture in their marriage. Despite their earlier agreement to remain child-free, Jacob's reaction revealed the truth Naomi had perhaps always suspected: he had never truly accepted their decision. His excitement about impending fatherhood clashed violently with Naomi's unwavering stance. She doesn't want to become a mother, not now, perhaps not ever. And unlike many women who might waver under pressure from a spouse, Naomi stands resolute in her conviction. The conversations between them have devolved from loving discussions into tense standoffs. Jacob sees this pregnancy as destiny, a sign that they should embrace parenthood regardless of their previous plans. Naomi sees it as her body, her choice, her life trajectory that shouldn't be derailed by an unplanned pregnancy. The divide between them widens with each passing day, and those who know them best whisper that this may be the end of the Hawthorne marriage. But the pregnancy dispute, devastating as it is, represents only the surface of a far darker and more complex situation unfolding in Fairmont Crest. In the aftermath of their separation, Jacob, a police officer known for his integrity and by-the-book approach to both law enforcement and life, shocked everyone by entering into a relationship with Randy Parker. To outsiders, it seemed sudden, perhaps even reckless for someone like Jacob to become involved with someone connected to Joey Armstrong's casino operations. But those closest to the situation know there's a history here that few suspected. Years ago, before Naomi ever entered his life, Jacob and Randy shared a brief but intense romance. It was a relationship that Jacob ultimately couldn't embrace, constrained by fears about his career, his family's expectations, or perhaps his own inability to accept that part of himself. When Jacob ended things, Randy's life took a darker turn. The rejection transformed him, pushing him toward a path of deception and crime that eventually led him into Joey Armstrong's dangerous orbit. Now, fate has brought them back together. The old feelings, buried but never truly extinguished, have reignited with surprising intensity. Jacob sees in Randy the man he once cared for, perhaps even loved. He notices Randy's charm, his intelligence, the vulnerability that still exists beneath the hardened exterior. For Jacob, this feels like a second chance, an opportunity to explore the connection he once denied himself. But Jacob remains dangerously blind to the reality of who Randy has become. Randy Parker is no longer the young man Jacob once knew. He's evolved into something far more dangerous, a hired killer working for Joey Armstrong, one of Fairmont Crest's most notorious and ruthless operators. Currently, Randy is deeply embedded in a murderous conspiracy targeting Bill Hamilton, a plot that involves insurance fraud, calculated assassination, and a web of lies that could ensnare anyone who gets too close. Jacob, despite his training as a police officer, has allowed his emotions to cloud his judgment. He sees only what he wants to see, a rekindled romance, a relationship that feels authentic and meaningful. He has no idea that the man sharing his bed is actively planning a murder, that every tender moment they share exists in the shadow of Randy's deadly agenda. This is where Naomi re-enters the picture, and the situation escalates from personal drama to potential catastrophe. Despite their separation and the bitterness surrounding their divorce, Naomi hasn't completely removed herself from Jacob's life. Whether motivated by lingering concern for her ex-husband, her own investigative instincts as a lawyer, or simply being in the wrong place at the right time, Naomi discovers the truth about Randy Parker. She learns about his criminal activities, his connection to Joey Armstrong, and perhaps most alarmingly, the murder plot targeting her father, Bill Hamilton. Naomi faces an impossible dilemma. On one hand, she has a moral and familial obligation to protect her father and to ensure that a killer faces justice. On the other hand, exposing Randy means destroying Jacob, not just emotionally, but potentially professionally and legally if questions arise about what Jacob knew and when he knew it. Still, Naomi's first instinct is to protect her father, and to save Jacob from his own dangerous naivety. She confronts Randy, threatening to reveal his true nature to Jacob. She wants Randy out of Jacob's life and away from her family, and she's prepared to burn down whatever she must to make that happen. But Randy Parker didn't survive in Joey Armstrong's world by being careless or easily intimidated. When Naomi issues her threat, Randy responds with a counterattack that cuts straight to her most vulnerable point. He knows about the pregnancy. More importantly, he knows about Naomi's decision to terminate it, a decision she's kept private, sharing with only a select few. Randy threatens to expose this information to Jacob, knowing full well how devastating it would be. Jacob wants that child desperately. Learning that Naomi intended to end the pregnancy without his knowledge, that she made this decision unilaterally while he dreamed of fatherhood, would shatter whatever remaining fondness he still holds for her. It would paint her as callous, selfish, perhaps even cruel in Jacob's eyes. For a man who values honesty and straightforwardness above almost everything else, this betrayal would be unforgivable. Randy's threat is calculated and precise. He knows that Naomi's relationship with Jacob, though ended, still matters to her. She doesn't want him to view her as a monster. She doesn't want to become the villain in the story of their failed marriage. And so Randy has found the perfect leverage: mutually assured destruction disguised as a standoff between two people who both have everything to lose. Now Naomi stands frozen in an impossible position. If she exposes Randy, he exposes her. If she remains silent, her father walks unknowingly toward a deadly trap, and Jacob continues his relationship with a killer. There's no clean exit, no solution that doesn't result in devastating consequences for someone she cares about. The question becomes, what matters most? Protecting her father's life? Saving Jacob from a dangerous delusion? Preserving her own dignity and privacy? Or preventing the complete implosion of multiple families in Fairmont Crest? Meanwhile, Jacob continues in blissful ignorance, believing he's finally found happiness after the pain of his divorce. He sees Randy as his salvation, the person who understands him in ways Naomi never could. He's building a future in his mind, one where he and Randy can be together openly, where he can finally live authentically without shame or hiding. He has no idea that every moment he spends with Randy brings him closer to professional ruin, personal devastation, and possibly even physical danger. He doesn't know that his ex-wife is wrestling with information that could save his life but destroy his spirit. He certainly doesn't realize that he's become a pawn in a much larger game involving murder, money, and the deadly secrets that bind Fairmont Crest's residents together. The collision course is set. Naomi must decide whether to prioritize truth or self-preservation. Randy must determine how far he's willing to go to protect his criminal enterprise and his relationship with Jacob. And Jacob must eventually confront the reality that his judgment has been catastrophically compromised by emotions he thought he'd buried years ago. In Fairmont Crest, where appearances mean everything and secrets are currency, this particular triangle of deception threatens to explode in ways that will reshape multiple lives. The perfect facades are cracking, revealing the messy, complicated, dangerous truths beneath. A marriage ended because of a pregnancy and conflicting life goals. A rekindled romance built on lies and selective blindness. A murder plot that could claim multiple victims beyond its intended target. And at the center of it all, three people whose choices in the coming days will determine not just their own fates, but the futures of everyone connected to them. The gates of Fairmont Crest may keep outsiders at bay, but they cannot contain the chaos brewing within. And when the truth finally emerges, as truth always does, the fallout will be nothing short of devastating. Naomi and Jacob's story began as a love story, evolved into a tragedy of incompatible desires, and now threatens to conclude as something far darker, a cautionary tale about secrets, lies, and the dangerous consequences of refusing to see the people we love as they truly are.